by scratching the surface, you get a terrible shock. It's such it's a heinous crime. People are so shocked by what...
Princess Catherine did not raise her voice when the court file was opened. That was what made the room colder. One by one, the figures were read aloud, each renovation expense tied to Windsor, each signature dragging the monarchy deeper into a silence no one wanted to break. Camilla sat still, Charles looked away, and Catherine's face froze as the private cost of power became painfully public. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine kept her hands folded, but everyone near the table saw the change in her face. The court review, a formal legal check of documents and spending records, had exposed unauthorized Windsor renovation expenses linked to Camilla, showing that private changes inside the royal estate had been charged without the proper approval from royal household channels. That detail mattered because Windsor was not just another home. It was the place where duty had been carried through wars, funerals, reigns, and family heartbreak. To alter it without clear permission felt less like decoration and more like a quiet breach of trust. Camilla breathed in slowly as the next entry was read. The Queen Consort heard the phrase, "Private Windsor Restoration," but the words did not soften the meaning. Several lines pointed toward comfort suites, private reception rooms, and exclusive access areas that had nothing to do with urgent repairs. She knew how quickly a number could become a judgment. She knew how quickly a room could turn from polite to dangerous. And in that moment, the silence around her felt sharper than any accusation. Charles shifted in his chair, then stopped himself. The king wanted to protect his wife, but he also understood the crown, the symbol of royal duty, authority, and public trust, could not survive if personal wishes looked stronger than official rules. He glanced toward Catherine, then toward the file, and that brief movement revealed the trap closing around him. If he defended Camilla too quickly, he risked looking weak. If he stayed silent, he risked leaving her alone. William noticed the repeated figure before anyone explained it. The prince lowered his eyes to the page, then looked up without speaking. One expense appeared under two different descriptions, and that small duplication carried the weight of something hidden. It suggested the file was not only about spending, it suggested a path, a method, a decision made in shadows and dressed in careful language. Catherine finally reached for the folder. She did not slam it shut. She closed it with both hands, gently, almost painfully, as if the papers themselves had become too heavy to hold open. In that controlled gesture, the room understood what she had understood. This was not only about Windsor repairs. This was about who believed they could change the palace without permission. And before anyone could decide what the numbers meant, the people behind those numbers had to face what they stood to lose. Every scandal has paperwork, but inside the palace, paperwork does not bleed, people do. Catherine carried the shock in silence. William carried it like a warning. Charles carried it like a wound, and Camilla carried it like an accusation, before the first question was even asked. The exposed Windsor expenses did not simply reveal money spent. They revealed pressure, pride, and a family divided by control. Catherine understood why this moment cut so deeply. Windsor was not just a royal address. It was an inherited duty, a place passed from one reign to the next, with the weight of memory still inside its walls. The royal household, the working system of staff, offices, approvals, and records that keeps palace life running, existed to protect that duty from personal desire. She had always treated royal spaces as something borrowed from history, not owned by the person living there. Camilla felt that judgment before anyone spoke it. The Queen Consort had been elevated by marriage and accepted by ceremony. But acceptance had never meant freedom from scrutiny. Every step she took near royal property carried old shadows. Every private decision could be turned into a public test of character. She told herself the renovations were about comfort and restoration. Yet the court file made them look like something colder. Influence moving through locked doors. William studied the expense categories with a stillness that made the room uneasy. The prince saw more than costly changes. He saw approvals routed around people who should have known. He saw careful wording where plain truth should have been. That mattered, because the future king knew one broken process could become a dangerous example. If Windsor could be changed quietly once, then what else could be changed the same way? Charles felt the pressure closing around him. The king privately asked whether the paperwork could still be contained, but the answer that came back was brutal. Once a court file entered the record, it no longer belonged to palace control. A court file meant documents placed into a legal process, where private choices could become part of a formal review. He understood then that protecting Camilla would not erase the exposure. It might only deepen it. Catherine looked from the papers to Charles, then toward Camilla, and something inside her hardened. She was not chasing punishment. She was searching for the first loose thread. Her voice stayed calm, but the question carried the force of a door closing. Who first allowed the Windsor works to begin? That question pulled the family backward, toward one forgotten moment that had quietly started everything. The scandal did not begin in court. It began months earlier, behind closed doors, during a private Windsor dinner, where one sentence changed the temperature of the room. Camilla had spoken lightly, almost casually, about modernizing tired corners of the castle. Catherine had gone still then too. William had noticed. Charles had said nothing, and silence, in that moment, became permission. Catherine remembered the dinner with painful clarity. It was meant to be simple, private, and controlled, but Camilla's words had changed everything. The Queen Consort spoke of altering several private rooms before the next royal gathering, and she made it sound harmless. A royal gathering meant an official family event, where senior members were expected to appear united, polished, and steady before guests. That mattered, because Windsor was not a place for sudden personal changes. It carried history, duty, and the memory of the late Queen in every decision attached to it. Camilla smiled when she said the rooms needed comfort. Then the smile weakened when Catherine answered. The princess did not accuse her. She simply warned that any renovation connected to Windsor had to pass through formal approval, especially if royal funds or household accounts were involved. Formal approval meant written permission from the right offices before money could be spent. Catherine knew why that rule existed. It protected the crown from the appearance of private luxury being hidden inside public duty. William watched the warning land badly. The prince saw Camilla's face tighten, and he saw the Queen Consort take Catherine's caution as something personal. To Camilla, it felt like a challenge to her place beside Charles. She had fought for years to be accepted, and now one careful sentence made her feel judged again. Her pride did not break openly. It hardened quietly. Charles chose peace when clarity was needed. The king heard Catherine's warning, saw Camilla's embarrassment, and understood William's concern. Yet he let the moment pass. He wanted the dinner to survive. He wanted his wife spared another wound. But that silence became the mistake everyone would later return to, because the crown does not stay protected by avoiding discomfort. Camilla later allowed a private instruction to move forward under the phrase, "urgent comfort improvements." The wording sounded small, but it was wide enough to hide the true scale of the work. A senior courtier eventually noticed that the same rooms Catherine had questioned at dinner appeared in the court file under softer descriptions. That discovery made the past impossible to ignore. Catherine remembered that dinner and felt the truth settle inside her. The court exposure was not a shock from nowhere. It was the delayed consequence of a warning ignored. And once the memory of that dinner returned, the next meeting could no longer remain polite. The confrontation happened without cameras, without aides, and without the careful smiles the palace uses to survive. Catherine entered the private sitting room with the file pressed against her side. Camilla was already standing near the fireplace, pale but composed. For a few seconds, neither woman moved. Then Catherine placed the papers on the table, and the sound was small, but it landed like thunder. Catherine chose that room because she did not want the scandal to become a public royal spectacle before the truth had been faced in private. The court exposure had already done enough damage. A court exposure meant private records had been opened inside a legal review, where hidden choices could no longer stay behind palace doors. That mattered because the Windsor expenses were no longer just numbers. They were proof that trust inside the family had been cracked, and now the crack had a paper trail. Camilla looked at the file, then back at Catherine. The queen consort tried to hold her ground, but the papers between them made pride feel fragile. Catherine told her Windsor was not a personal project. She said it calmly, almost softly, and that made it cut deeper. The princess had followed every rule, every approval, every careful boundary. To her, the issue was not taste or comfort. It was permission. It was respect. It was the difference between serving history and treating history like private space. Camilla's face hardened as she pushed back. She said she had spent years being judged for every breath, every room, every chair, every step she took beside Charles. The queen consort insisted the file was being turned into a weapon, not because the renovations were wicked, but because people had waited for a reason to humiliate her. Her voice did not break, but it carried exhaustion. She was not only defending expenses, she was defending the years she had spent trying to belong. Catherine opened the folder again and pointed to one entry linked to a private suite. She asked why it had been categorized as heritage preservation when it clearly served personal use. Heritage preservation meant spending meant to protect historic parts of a royal property, not improve private comfort. That detail mattered, because one wrong label could change how the expense looked, how it was approved, and who carried responsibility for it. Camilla said nothing. The pause stretched too long. Catherine watched her carefully, and in that silence, the accusation became heavier than any shouted answer. Camilla did not confess. She did not deny. She simply looked away for one sharp second, and that was enough to change the room. William entered after the exchange, and the air shifted again. The prince did not comfort Catherine. He did not rescue Camilla. He looked at the file, then asked the question that stripped away every excuse. Who authorized the payment chain? That question moved the battle away from emotion and into power, where the real control of the monarchy was about to be tested. In the monarchy, power is not always held by the person wearing the crown. Sometimes it sits inside a ledger, inside a signature box, inside the quiet authority to approve or deny. As the Windsor expenses were traced line by line, Charles looked older, William looked colder, and Catherine watched the machinery of palace control reveal something no speech could hide. William focused on the payment chain because that was where emotion ended and responsibility began. The palace financial chain meant the route money followed, from request to approval to final payment, and every step was supposed to leave a clear record. That mattered because Windsor belonged to royal duty before it belonged to private comfort. If one person could move money around that system without proper approval, then the protection around every royal residence suddenly looked weaker. Charles read the first page, then the second, then stopped. The king set the paper down without speaking, and the silence around him felt painful. He understood what the file suggested. His desire to protect Camilla may have allowed others to act too freely. His wish to keep peace may have made his own authority look uncertain. For a monarch, that was not a small wound. It was a mark against judgment. Catherine looked at William and felt a quiet sadness. The prince was not angry in the loud way people expected. He was calm, and that calmness frightened her more. The future king was studying the file, like a man learning where trust had failed. Catherine knew why his role now mattered. Future stewardship meant proving that royal property could not be shaped by private preference, hidden approvals, or soft wording made to protect powerful people. William pointed to the second approval note. The prince saw that it had been added after the work had already begun, and that changed everything. A secondary approval note meant an extra written sign-off added to support a decision. But timing mattered. If the note came after the renovation started, then it looked less like permission and more like a repair job after danger appeared. Charles asked for the finance officer to explain it clearly. The officer revealed through a documented internal account that one objection had been raised early, but it never reached Catherine or William. That revelation landed hard, because it showed the problem was not only Camilla's request, it was the quiet blocking of concern before it reached the people who would have questioned it. Catherine felt the room tighten around Charles. The king had to choose. He could shield Camilla and make the crown look captured by private loyalty, or he could allow consequences and wound the person closest to him. William waited. Catherine waited. Camilla's name sat inside every pause. And when the choice finally came, the first consequence fell with devastating speed. Camilla did not collapse when the decision came. She did something worse. She sat perfectly still as the restrictions were read aloud, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles lost color. The monarchy had not stripped her of rank, not publicly. But it had taken something more intimate: access, confidence, and the quiet permission to move through Windsor as though no one would question her. Camilla heard every word, but one phrase cut deeper than the rest: written oversight. It meant she could no longer approve, request, or direct Windsor renovation spending without another formal check placed above her decision. That mattered, because access had always been power inside palace life. A person did not need to shout orders to hold influence. Sometimes influence lived in who could ask, who could approve, and who could move through old rooms without being stopped. Charles watched her face and felt the cost of the decision settle on his chest. The king knew the restriction was not a removal of title, but it was still a public institution, correcting a private marriage. That was why it hurt. Camilla remained beside him in rank, yet the crown had quietly drawn a line around her authority. He had wanted to protect her from humiliation. Now he had to watch the palace protect itself from the appearance of favoritism. Catherine listened as the temporary review panel was announced. A review panel meant a small group assigned to check decisions, records, and approvals before further action could happen. This panel would give William and Catherine greater visibility over future changes connected to historic royal residences. That mattered because Windsor was not only a family space, it was part of national memory, and every alteration carried meaning beyond comfort. William received the next detail with a colder expression. The prince was told one completed room might have to be reopened for inspection. That single sentence changed the room again. A hidden decision was no longer hidden if the walls themselves had to be examined. The future king understood what that meant. The scandal had moved from paper into place, from numbers into stone, from private choice into something people could point to. Catherine was then told the unauthorized expenses could require repayment, reclassification, or removal from protected household accounts. Protected household accounts meant funds guarded for official royal use, not personal preference. She did not celebrate that possibility. The princess only lowered her eyes, because repayment would not restore trust. It would only prove how badly trust had been bent. Camilla stood when the reading ended. The queen consort moved toward the door without looking back, and every step carried humiliation she refused to show. Charles remained seated for one moment too long. Catherine noticed it. William noticed it too. For the first time, the crown and the marriage seemed to stand in separate rooms. The turning point did not come through a public statement. It came in a private conversation between Charles and Catherine, with no aides, no advisors, and no one left to soften the truth. He stood by the desk, tired and silent. She waited by the door, still carrying the weight of Windsor. When he finally spoke, his voice held no command, only regret. Charles asked Catherine to remain after the formal meeting, and the request carried more meaning than the words. The king was not speaking to her as a distant family member. He was speaking to the woman who would one day stand beside William in the next chapter of the monarchy. A future queen meant the wife of the future king, someone expected to protect royal duty, public trust, and family continuity. That mattered, because this conversation was no longer about one file. It was about who would guard Windsor after him. Catherine did not move closer at first. The princess could feel the sadness in the room. And it was not the sadness of defeat. It was the sadness of truth, arriving too late. Charles admitted he should have stopped the renovation process after her warning at the Windsor dinner. He did not dress it up. He did not blame staff. He did not hide behind confusion. He said he had chosen peace when the crown needed firmness. Charles lowered his eyes after saying it, and Catherine felt no victory. The king's admission should have brought relief, but it only made the wound clearer. She had wanted accountability, not humiliation. She had wanted Windsor protected, not the family broken open by a decision that should never have gone this far. The correction had come, yes, but it had taken trust with it. Catherine finally answered with quiet restraint. She told Charles that Windsor had to belong to duty before it belonged to anyone's comfort. The king listened because he knew she was right. Legacy meant what a monarch leaves behind, not only in titles and buildings, but in choices people remember after the room goes silent. This mattered because the scandal had shown how quickly private influence could damage public faith. Charles then confirmed what would change. Future Windsor decisions would require written approval from the next generation's household representatives. Household representatives meant trusted people who speak for senior royal households in official decisions. Catherine understood at once. This was more than a policy change. The monarch was quietly moving moral authority toward William and her. Catherine accepted the weight without smiling. Charles saw that, and he understood why she had frozen in court. She had not been weak. She had been measuring the cost of what had been exposed. Now the private fracture had to survive, the one force no palace can fully control the outside world. By morning, the story no longer belonged to the palace. It belonged to the country. At Windsor's gates, a quiet crowd gathered beneath gray skies, staring through the ironwork as though the stones themselves might answer. Then came the front page that captured it all: Windsor's hidden cost. Beneath the headline was one image: Catherine leaving court, expression unreadable, while Camilla looked away. Catherine became the face of the moment before she ever spoke about it. Her frozen reaction carried more power than a statement, because people saw discipline where they expected anger. The court exposure had turned private renovation expenses into a national test of trust. Royal privilege meant the special access and comfort that comes with royal rank, and now the country was asking whether that privilege could survive without strict control. That mattered because the monarchy depended on restraint. If restraint disappeared, respect could follow. Camilla felt the isolation grow with every headline. The queen consort was not being judged only over one room or one invoice. She was being judged through old doubts, old wounds, and old questions about whether she had truly earned the authority she now carried. The scandal gave people a reason to revisit everything she had spent years trying to move beyond. For her, the punishment was not just restriction inside Windsor. It was seeing her place debated as if acceptance could be taken back overnight. William understood why the silence outside Windsor Castle felt so dangerous. The prince watched as broadcasters framed the story as a test of accountability, a simple word that meant people in power must answer for what they do. That framing mattered because it moved the scandal beyond family drama. It became a question of whether the crown could correct itself before the public demanded correction from outside. Charles heard the phrase "royal excess" repeated across the morning coverage, and the king knew how damaging it sounded. Royal excess meant the image of wealth, comfort, and privilege going too far, especially when ordinary people expected duty and humility. He had spent years trying to steady the monarchy, yet one file had made the whole institution look vulnerable again. Camilla's pain was personal to him, but the wound to the crown was public. Catherine saw the front page and said nothing. William saw it too, and the future king understood the meaning of that single image. Catherine looked controlled. Camilla looked exposed. The palace looked divided. Outside Windsor, the crowd did not shout. They simply watched the cars pass, and that quiet felt more damning than anger. Charles knew the palace response could not be soft. Camilla knew silence would not save her. Catherine knew the final decision had to mean something. But the loudest judgment would not come from headlines. It would come from the family's final decision. In the end, Windsor did not fall. It stood exactly where it had always stood. Older than scandal, stronger than pride, colder than excuse. But the people inside it changed. Catherine walked away from the court file no longer frozen. William emerged with sharper authority. Charles accepted the wound of his own hesitation, and Camilla learned that rank could open doors, but trust kept them open. Catherine understood the final verdict before it was fully spoken. The unauthorized Windsor renovation expenses had become more than a scandal. They had become a lesson in accountability inside the modern monarchy. Accountability meant that even powerful people had to answer for decisions that touched royal property, royal money, and public trust. That mattered, because Windsor was not simply a home. It was a symbol of duty, memory, and restraint, and the crown could not allow private comfort to look stronger than inherited responsibility. Charles accepted the decision with a silence heavier than any speech. The king knew love could explain hesitation, but it could not excuse weak judgment. He had wanted to shield Camilla from another public wound, yet he now understood that protecting one person too strongly could damage the institution everyone served. The crown meant the monarchy itself, the larger duty above any private relationship. And in that painful moment, he accepted that the crown had to come before comfort. William stood firmer than before. The prince did not need to raise his voice to make the next chapter clear. His influence had been cemented as the future guardian of royal discipline, and everyone in the room understood what that meant. The next reign would not tolerate blurred lines, softened labels, or hidden approvals. Generational oversight, the shared review by the younger royal households before major decisions, would become a permanent safeguard, not a temporary punishment. Camilla remained queen consort, but something invisible had changed forever. She still had rank, ceremony, and a place beside Charles, yet the freedom she once assumed inside Windsor had been limited. The queen consort knew it. Catherine knew it. William knew it. Trust had not been destroyed completely, but it had been placed behind locks that would no longer open with personal influence alone. Catherine felt no triumph. The princess had not wanted humiliation. She had wanted protection, for a place that carried more history than any single person's comfort. Her shock had become quiet resolve, and that resolve became her strength. She proved that power did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrived through restraint, through discipline, through the courage to close a folder and demand the truth. Charles looked at Catherine and understood what Windsor had revealed. Camilla had been corrected. William had been sharpened. The monarchy had chosen survival over softness, duty over personal preference, and legacy over private power. There was nothing more to ask, because Windsor had already answered. The crown may forgive, but it never forgets. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.